usually how things go. Really casual, really fun. I'm Amanda. I'm the events coordinator at Belmont Books. We have a few more events this month before we close out September. Next Wednesday at 7, we have a discussion on like writing and craft from 3 really great Grub Street writers. Okay. If you're not familiar, the authors are Rachel Barenbaum, who did Atomic Anna, so it's historical fiction. We have E.B. Bartels, who wrote a nonfiction book called Good Grief about grieving pets. Yeah, really niche, really interesting. And then we also have Susan Bernhardt, who is a former bookseller here, and her debut novel, Winterloon, is kind of a coming-of-age story. So they will be here next Wednesday. And if any of you have any kiddos, I believe on Tuesday the 26th, we have Karina Jan Glazer, who does the Vanderbeeker series. We're doing a lot of school events, but she's also doing a personal store event at 6 o'clock. So that's the rest of September. We're going to start tonight by introducing Deborah. Deborah L. Korn is a psychotherapist, teacher, clinical consultant, and researcher who has been on the faculty of the EMDR Institute for more than 25 years. She currently serves on the editorial board of the Journal of EMDR Practice and Research and is a regular presenter at the EMDR International Association Conference. She lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts with her family. And then, person we're all here to see tonight, Linda. Welcome back. This is Linda's second event with us. She was with us before the pandemic, if you can believe it, for her book Modern Dreamwork. And now we're so delighted to have her back. Linda Yael Schiller is a mind, body, and spiritual psychotherapist, consultant, author, international teacher. Linda facilitates group dream circles, provides individual, group, and corporate consultation, and trains professionals on working with dreams. She has designed several innovative methods for dream work. She's trained in numerous mind-body methods such as EMDR, EFT, energy psychology, Enneagram, and integrated trauma treatments. In addition to her professional work with dreams, she has been involved with her own dream sharing group for more than 30 years. Thank you, Linda, Deborah. Every round of applause for them.
So, I am so delighted to be here with you this evening to celebrate the release of your important and inspiring and incredibly interesting book. So I know everybody is very interested to hear what you have to say, so shall we get started?
Let's rock and roll.
Let's rock and roll.
Great.
All right. So let's begin by covering the basics.
Okay.
All right. Tell us what PTSDreams is about and about what led you to write this book now.
Okay. So, in a nutshell, PTSDreams looks at the interface between our dreams and nightmares and our history of trauma. And I had always known after I wrote the first book that I had another one in me, that it was going to be this book looking at post-traumatic nightmares, because I do a lot of work in my psychotherapy practice with trauma survivors, but I didn't expect or plan to write it quite as soon. The other one just came out 2.5 years ago. But then the world turned, and between the pandemic and climate change and war and violence and various governmental administration transitions or lack thereof, not only have we all had whatever personal events in our life in the sort of realm of what we would call private trauma in our life, but we've all been exposed on a global level to multiple traumatic events. And it just felt, I was sort of called to say, don't wait. So, some people for their pandemic projects, knitted a quilt. Some people, I have friends who made sourdough bread. I wrote a book about their pandemic project.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say that I am very, very glad that you decided to get this book out now, because we are absolutely in a mental health crisis worldwide, and people are searching, at least my experience out there is that people are searching for hope and guidance and direction about how to heal themselves, how to soothe themselves, how to make sense out of things. So, hooray.
Thank you.
So, who could benefit from reading this book?
Great. So, the way I wrote the book is sort of the way I talk to people. It's a conversational style. So, it's written for anyone who who's interested in dream work, written for anyone who's interested in the workings of their unconscious. And it's also, in addition to the general public, it's written for professionals in the field, for psychotherapists, for medical professionals, for spiritual directors and clergy people, because I work from this integrated body-mind approach, so that some of the language is a little clinical, some of it, I was telling Debbie before, in addition to sort of the work I do, I'm also a little tiny bit of a neuroscience geek, but I'm not allowed to get difficult questions from the neuroscientists in the group. But I did run all the stuff I wrote in the book by David first, who works at Harvard, to make sure that I wasn't making any mistakes. So if there are any mistakes, it's just my editor didn't catch them. But I don't think there are. But in any case, so anyone who's interested in dreams or dream work, whether you're just a layperson who likes it and is interested in it, or someone who works in the field, benefit for reading it.
Great. And so I wanted to ask you, from a definition perspective, what's the difference between a dream, a bad dream, and a nightmare?
Great. So a dream are those wonderful, vivid, lovely, or vague events that we have after we close our eyes and fall asleep at night. The difference between a dream, a bad dream, and a nightmare has to do with the emotional narrative that goes along with the storyline of the dream. So the storyline of the dream could be anything, but if our emotions and our feelings are pleasant, happy, excited, having a good time in the dream, it's a nice dream. If our emotions in the dream are a little bit anxious, a little bit worried, kind of sad, maybe that's a bad dream. If our emotions are terrified, furious, grief-stricken, then we're probably looking at more of a nightmare. So it's the type and quantity, I guess I might almost say, of your emotional response to the dream that you have that will determine, are we talking about a dream or are we talking about a nightmare?
So kind of the emotional valence or intensity,
Right.
quality of the material, of
Right.
the experience.
Right. One of the things we do in EMDR and other forms of energy psychology is, and you do it at doctor's offices, right? You go into the doctor and they say, rate your pain on a scale of 0 to 10. How bad is it? So if your pain is 0, then it's like, okay, you're probably good to go. And the higher up you get on the scale, the more severe your pain is, or the possible illness or struggle that you're having. It's the same way we can apply it to our emotions as well. If we have a dream where we're happy and there's a 0 on the upset scale, then it's a dream. If it's below 5, maybe it's a bad dream, but when we start getting 5 or higher, we're moving into nightmare territory.
Okay. And why do nightmares tend to be repetitive in nature?
In our ideal dream life, our dreams help us to digest and to metabolize, if you will, the events of our life. When we have nice things that are happening in our lives, our dreams may reflect that, because there are many layers in a dream, and one layer of the dream can be a reflection on what we've been going through the day before or the week before. If there are difficult things that are going on, and our system can still digest and metabolize them, we're not going to have repetitive dreams. We'll have a couple, we'll have a few, but they'll start to dissipate and they'll start to fade off, and eventually they'll either disappear or change into something neutral or pleasant. If our body-mind system is not able to metabolize the events that we have experienced or witnessed or have been hearing about or watching on our screens, and we're overloaded and it's more than our system can handle, then we can't metabolize the material. So our unconscious, in its wisdom, sends us an SOS from our unconscious. Hello, you've got some work to do here. You've got something you got to understand. There's something you have to figure out. If we don't listen, or if we don't get it, it's going to escalate, and it's going to up the ante. So there'll be more and more and more of these dreams, until at some point they might wake us up in the night, or some of my friends and clients talk about how they wake up screaming in the night, or their partner says, you were screaming in your sleep again, and they may or may not remember what was happening. But this is when our system is overloaded, and it hasn't been able to digest whatever it is that we need to process.
So in a sense, it's your brain throwing up flares.
That's a great way of putting it,
you know,
yeah.
that there's some unfinished business, or there's
Exactly.
something frozen or locked in the nervous system that needs to get metabolized.
Exactly right. Because we know that when someone has a response to trauma, there are several typical ways that we might respond. And the classic sort of fight, flight, or freeze response to trauma, if we do that and are successfully able to avoid being attacked or being unsafe, then like the animal in the wild who's attacked, if the rabbit is attacked by the hawk, right, or the hawk is flying overhead, the rabbit has a couple of choices. It can hop away and hide in the bushes and escape the hawk. A rabbit probably, so that's the flight.
Yeah.
The rabbit probably can't turn around and fight the hawk off, like perhaps a wild boar might be able to. That would be the fight. But the other option the rabbit might have would be to freeze, to stop and hold still and sort of play dead, because a hawk tracks movement. So if the rabbit is very still, the hawk might not be able to see it. So it saved itself by not moving. We, in our nervous systems, respond the same way to danger. So we can get locked into feeling like there's something we have to fight all the time, or we have to run away all the time, or as Debbie just said, we kind of get frozen in our tracks and aren't able to unfreeze. And these conditions then can create a fertile ground for nightmares.
Got it. So in your book, you discuss how there are two narratives in a dream, right? There's the storyline of the dream itself, and then there's the emotional narrative. So why is the emotional narrative such a key element here?
So
Such a
when-
what?
Such a key element.
Key. Sorry.
Key.
I'm gonna answer that in two ways. So I'm gonna back up first and say that we don't even use the word of interpreting dreams. So I'm not telling you what your dream means. I'm working with you, I'm asking questions, I'm helping to guide you, I'm looking at my associations and your associations, because the ultimate meaning of the dream always lies within the dreamer, him or herself. And that's one of the guiding principles of IASD, which is the International Association for the Study of Dreams, that I've been a member of for some 30 years. So that's a real guiding principle. Given that, in relation to your question, we all have different responses, and we have different emotional responses to the same dream. So just for example, to use an example, if I have a dream that I'm walking down the road and I see a dog in the street, and I go over and say, oh, look at what a cute dog, and I lean down and I pet it, and I have a nice sort of friendly response to the dog in the road, that's one kind of a dream. But if Debbie has the same dream, and instead her emotional response is, oh no, there's a dog in the road, I'm afraid it might bite me, I'd rather get out of here right away. It's the same storyline, but it's two very different responses to the storyline. So that's why the emotional narrative helps make the dream personal to the dreamer and idiosyncratic to the dreamer.
Right. It's interesting. I hear you talking about that, and it makes me think that it makes me think about the fact that trauma is both objective and subjective.
Right.
Right. There's the event, and then there's the response to the event, and no two people are going to have the same response to the event.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Interesting. Okay. Now, as a trauma therapist, I know that one common symptom of trauma is dissociation.
Right.
So can you explain dissociation, and can you share your thoughts about the connection between dissociation and nightmares?
Absolutely. So dissociation is a brilliant unconscious strategy that our minds create for us when we're in a situation that is so overwhelming that we can't bear to be there, but we can't get away. Children growing up in abusive homes, they don't have an opportunity to get away. Being in a prisoner of war camp, being in a war theater, any situation where the person experiencing a trauma is trapped and can't leave in their body, their unconscious devises a brilliant way of being in two places at once. The body is wherever it is, but your mind goes somewhere else. One person that I worked with said, I used to look out the window when my alcoholic father came home banging around the house and I was scared at any minute he'd come into my room, but I'd look out the window and I'd see the tree outside my window, and I'd imagine that I was in that bird's nest up in the tree with the bird keeping me safe under her wings. So she really wasn't in her body at that moment down in her bedroom. So this is an example of the dissociative process. What happens with dissociation is it happens on a spectrum or a continuum. So at one end of the spectrum is normative, sort of everyday, if you will, dissociation that we all experience at various points in time. Things like highway hypnosis. You know, you're driving along and it's like, oops, my exit was about 10 minutes ago. Who's been driving the car for the last 10 minutes? You're sitting in a workshop or a lecture, hopefully not tonight, but then you realize, oh, I haven't heard a thing that the professor was saying for the last 10 minutes. Where was your mind? So these are sort of normal, everyday kinds of dissociation. As we then move down the spectrum into the more traumatic types of dissociative experiences, we get this sort of separation of emotion and event. So you might have a memory of an event that happened, oh yeah, I was in a car accident and I feel nothing. I'm numb. I'm neutral. The emotional memory is somewhere in there, but it's gotten split off from the event itself. This is how our system protects itself until we're in a safe enough place to be able to process it. Sometimes at the other end of as we move down the spectrum, the memory becomes so the memory of the event becomes so separated from the emotional narrative that they're like two separate things. And we can have emotionally laden nightmares, for example, of car crashes and earthquakes and being chased by monsters. And none of these things happen in our real life, but they're symbolic and metaphoric representations of something that our unconscious has put aside until we are ready in our life today to process it and to deal with it. At the far end of this dissociative spectrum is what used to be called multiple personality disorder, that's now called dissociative identity disorder. So it really ranges from, highway hypnosis all the way to DID and everything in between. So in terms of dream work, to bring us back.
Yeah, bring us back.
We sometimes can get what are called memory bursts through our dreams and our nightmares, which is a memory that has been buried, put aside, hidden underground, can sort of bleed through, if you will, during our dream or our nightmare. Sometimes a sudden, oh my God, this happened to me. I never remembered that before. However, we never want to assume when we're working with someone with a dream that something that comes through in the dream is an actual memory. We want to think about it maybe, or hypothesize, or investigate whether or not it could have been something that happened, but we don't want to assume. That's where we get into sort of dangerous territory. More often than not, our dreams give us symbols and metaphors. So we want to look at the symbol and the metaphor to decode what the dream means rather than jump to conclusions.
Right, yeah, I often talk with people about when they say, well, is it true? Is this truth, right? And I always say, let's hang out in this domain of emotional truth, personal truth for now as a place to explore, right? Rather than talking about absolute truth. That's the dangerous territory.
Yeah, and that's beautiful and a lovely way to think about, if someone has a dream, the emotional truth of the dream is true. Whether the actual storyline truth of the dream is true is a different question.
So there's those two pieces again.
Yeah.
Got it. So, my clients often say to me, how am I going to know when I have problems?
Speak up a little bit, you're having a hard time.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
My clients often say to me, how am I going to know when I processed.
Oh, thank you,
something
Amanda.
through.
Let me get Christian. He's our tech guy.
This is my third event today, and my voice is a little hoarse.
And it's my almost third event today.
But you have a big voice when you want to.
Yeah, but I'm like a little bit hoarse, but I'm
I'll just speak up. I can really make an effort.
Should we keep going till the microphones are ready?
Okay. What was I saying?
Oh, your clients.
So my clients often say to me, how am I going to know when I have processed through this stuff in my life, these traumatic experiences? And so I would ask you, how does someone know when they've worked through a nightmare?
Great. So the way you know that you've worked through a nightmare, the short answer is when you're not having the nightmare anymore, right? So that's one piece of the answer. But in the process of getting there, the answer is when the emotional upset of the dream goes from 8 or 9 or 10 and starts dropping to 6 or 5 and eventually down to 3, and the emotional response is much less upsetting. So that's one indication that you're processing and you're working it through. Another indication is if the dream imagery starts to shift and change. If in your original dream, and let's say it's a repetitive dream, and every time in your dream you're being chased by a nightmare, that's a Freudian slip, right? You're being chased by a monster, you're just about at a wall, and the monster is really close behind you, and you hit a wall, like literally, you hit a brick wall, and you can't get over it, and any moment, you're going to be attacked by the monster, and then you wake up. If the dream starts to shift, where the next time you have the dream, somehow you're able to notice that, oh, there's a side to the wall there's an opening, and you're able to get through the opening to the other side, and the monster doesn't follow you. That's a shift. That's a difference. Or maybe, thank you so much, Amanda. Maybe is it on? It's not on. Sorry. This is not on. But I'll keep talking. Maybe in your dream, all of a sudden, you get superhuman strength and you take a jump and you jump up and you get to the top of the wall so the monster can't get you. That's a shift in the dream as well. And maybe at some point in time, you are resourced enough, which is going to lead us to the next question, I think. You have enough safety and you've done enough work outside of the dream to bring in your safety posse with you, or you have found your resources inside of the dream to turn and face the monster and say, who are you? Why are you here? What are you trying to tell me? And as a dear friend of mine who I'm not naming any names but is in the room right now, said this monster turned out to be one of her dear friends, picked her up, gave her a hug, and danced with her. She'd been running from this monster for years, but in this dream, it transformed into something enjoyable and positive. So that's when you know you've dealt with and resolved whatever it was you were previously running from, too.
Great answer. So in your book, you talk about the Gaia method for work. So in this book, you talk about the Gaia method of working.
Excuse me. I'm wondering if it would be helpful if we stood up for people in the back.
Wait, I didn't hear what you just said.
I was saying I was wondering if it would be helpful if we stood up since the microphones aren't working.
I think it's work. I hear something coming out of that
Yeah, we
speaker.
heard like a tap.
Try it.
Really? Does this help?
No.
Does this help?
Does this help?
No.
No.
Does this help? Does this help? Oh.
I think standing.
So maybe when we
I'm just
speak,
going to
we'll
speak
say
louder.
it.
You are so darn loud.
Oh.
I don't think I can
No.
be. Linda's not loud. She's so loud.
Project.
I mean,
She's
loud in the
project.
best way.
Sorry.
No, beautifully loud.
nothing
I'm
to
projecting.
apologize.
Okay.
Oh yeah, you're so.
Just so darn loud.
Yeah.
You've got your professor voice.
Yeah.
My professor voice. Okay.
No, I'm gonna project. So I was saying, in the book, you describe the Gaia method for working with nightmares, And as I recall, Gaia stands for the Guided Active Imagination Approach.
Yes.
And so tell us about the elements of this approach.
Okay. So thank you, all of you who are, whether you're in the front or the back, if you can't hear, wave your hand or something and we'll know to speak up. I was a professor at Boston University School of Social Work for about 20 years, so I guess I have a projecting professor voice. But do let me know if I get too hoarse. So Gaia, Guided Active Imagination Approach, is based on 2 pillars, and one pillar is Jungian style active imagination dream work, and the other pillar is best practice trauma treatment. So in the guide, and I designed it particularly for work with nightmares, because when we're working with a regular dream, or we're working with a bad dream that's a little bit scary, we don't need to sort of tiptoe in and be super, super careful and cautious, because we're not dealing with large upsetting emotions. But when we are dealing with large upsetting emotions in a dream, we don't want to run the risk of re-traumatizing the dreamer by sort of going in like gangbusters and kind of breaking something open. So I designed the method to let us go in slowly and carefully. And there is part 1, and then a bridge, and then part 2 in the Gaia method. So part 1 is modeled after resource installation from EMDR, where I ask, first of all, if a dreamer comes to me and says, I have a dream, or I had a nightmare, I'm not even going to assume they want to tell me the nightmare. The first thing I might say is, do you want to talk about it? Or do you want to share it? Because sometimes, particularly if I'm in a clinical setting, they might just want to say, I have a nightmare, and that's it for today. So I want to really honor and respect the pacing of whoever I'm talking to only go, as we say in IFS, internal family systems, to just go as fast as the slowest part is comfortable going. So I don't want to overreach the comfort of my dreamer. So if they say, yes, I want to talk about it, and they tell me the dream, my next question is, do you want to work on it? Because maybe they want to tell me, but they don't even want to do anything else. That was sufficient for today. If I get a yes there too, then we move into the Gaia method. And I say, first things first, we're going to really set you up to be safe. So tell me about, who would you like to have with you in the dream to keep you company, to keep you safe, so that you're not alone and you don't have to go through this again by yourself, which is often the case in the original trauma. So people will list their friends, their relatives, their pets, their departed relatives from the other side. They can list real or imaginary people. One of my 8-year-olds said, I'm going to bring Mary Poppins with me into the dream, which I thought was brilliant.
Fabulous.
Pardon me?
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And objects. Is there anything you want to bring with you, your invisibility cloak from Harry Potter, or do you want to bring with you a flashlight because it might be dark in there? So, and I'm just going to keep saying anything else, until they say, I'm good. I got everything I need. And when I'm working in a clinical setting also, if they haven't invited me in, I might say, would you like for me to be in there with you as well? Because sometimes people would like me to, but I'm sort of shy about asking. So I'll check to see if they're interested in having me join them. So once I got my posse, I'm good to go, then I say, with your group of protection, now go ahead and peek inside the dream. Here's the bridge. So in this part, and this is the difference actually in modern dream work and PTSD, I added the bridge between book 1 and book 2. Look inside the dream, see if there's anything you might have accidentally overlooked. Is there a safety person there, or a safety place in the dream, or something that gives you comfort that you might have forgotten to tell me, or you might not have noticed the first time? So sometimes someone will say, well, actually, now that you mention it, when I look over there in the corner of the woods that were dark and scary, I see there's this lovely old wise woman with 2 long gray braids, and she is really comforting, and I think she is a spirit woman for me, and she's going to protect me. So say, great. So notice that she's in the dream too, and she's there to help keep you safe and protect you. Once we've got from the outside of the dream and the inside of the dream, we gather all the resources and we say, okay, let's now do the active imagination. Go inside of the dream with all the resources you need and begin to interact with the dream characters, with the dream object, with anything that was fearful or scary that you need more information about, that you need to give some calming and soothing to, that you need to get the news from about what's going on so you can take it with you into your waking life. Because one of the guidelines of working with nightmares is that somewhere buried in the dream is going to be a gift. Even in our most traumatic nightmares, and this is straight from the Talmud, that every nightmare or every dream contains a gift. We just have to look for it. So once we're safe enough, we can go inside, meet with, dialogue with, confront, fly away from whatever is the right approach in this nightmare, and find and take out with us the gift that is there for us, but just got buried in the rubble. And then we come back out of the dream and talk about how was that.
And what period of time are we talking about that all of this takes place?
This could take place in an hour, if I'm having a clinical hour or something. If I'm in my dream circle, and there are 6 of us, and we have 2 hours, we're going to divide 3 or 4 people's turns, so to speak, into those 2 hours. So we might not get through the whole thing, because if we got 20 minutes, we may not get through the whole thing. If we have more unlimited time, someone who I'm friendly with, or as a relative, or I'm seeing in therapy, this might take weeks and months and years. Because if someone's experienced lots of deep trauma or lots of layers, we're carefully and slowly peeling back that onion, and it takes time. So part of our guidance is to be patient with the process and to notice the small progressions of movement, even if we don't get from 10 to 0 in 1 hour.
So you touched on this earlier with regard to one of our earlier questions, but who gets to determine the meaning of a dream? So, what's the role of the dream worker, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, whether it's a therapist, who gets to play a part in determining meaning?
So as you mentioned, the ultimate meaning of the dream is with the dreamer, him or herself. If it's your dream, you decide, this is what my dream means, this is not what my dream means. If we're working with someone, a friend or relative, we get to pipe up and have an opinion, but we don't get to impose our opinion. So part of what we learned through IASD, through Jeremy Taylor, one of our noted dream workers, he taught us a method of doing dream work where we say, if this were my dream, I might be thinking about this. Or if this were my dream, I might be wondering about that. So that's one way for us to pay attention to our own projections. So we're not superimposing our projection on the dreamer, but we still get to weigh in on something the dreamer might not have thought of. Because even Jung famously said that he needed help on decoding and unpacking his own dreams, because we all have blind spots. We cannot see the back of our own heads without not just one, but at least 2 mirrors. So working with at least one other person, and sometimes with a group of people, just gives us so much more insight and potential than we could find by ourselves.
And can a dream mean more than one thing?
Yes.
Can there be more than one
Yeah.
interpretation or meaning?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are multiple simultaneously true layers in a dream, and depending on how much time we have and interest on the part of the dreamer, we can simply look at the dream story and say, oh, that was really cool, that was a fun dream, I'm out of here. But if we want to explore deeper layers of meaning, another method that I designed that I describe in the book is called the Pardes method. And Pardes is a Hebrew word, it means orchard, and it's also an acronym, and it's the way we read Torah, we read holy text through ever deepening layer of inquiry. So the P in English stands for pshat, which means the simple layer, which in the dream would be the storyline of the dream. The R stands for the Hebrew word remez, which means hint or hinted at. So this is the layer of the dream where we get our first associations. Oh yeah, this reminds me of that, or I dreamt about going to India because I had Indian food for dinner last night. Oh, that's my first hint. It wasn't necessarily contained in the dream, but the dream hinted at it. The next layer, the D, stands for drash, which comes from the word lidrosh, which in Hebrew is to chase after or to pursue. So this is the layer that we pursue the deep and hidden meanings of the dream through a variety of different methods of dream work, whether it's Gestalt, where you embody every person in the dream, the tree part of me, the grandmother part of me, the old lady part of me, or many, many different types of dream work, re-entering the dream. This is where we do the different types of methods of dreaming. And then the final layer in this method that I put together is the sod, which means in English secret. So this layer is where we can look at spiritual implications of our dream, peek around the corners of time and space. Sometimes our precognitive dreams might come in at this layer. We can be in contact with departed relatives, with spiritual beings, with the divine, however we understand who or what that is. And at this layer, we can dream not only for ourselves, but we can dream for other people, and we can dream for the world. So we might look at any one or all of those layers of a dream, depending on our interest and our time.
Great. And if someone is trying to do this on their own, they're trying to resolve their nightmares, how do they know when it's time to seek out a professional, to look for a therapist or someone to help them in this process? And more specifically, do you think there are particular kinds of therapy models that lend themselves to helping people work through nightmares, work through PTSD dreams?
Great. So yes, if you're working on a dream either by yourself or with someone else, and your distress level doesn't get less when you're working on the nightmare, if it stays really high and you're not able to kind of get any movement in it, you might want to think about what else is going on here. If your level of upset, if your response to working on your dream is you get more upset, you get more scared, you get more angry, rather than feeling calmer or more at peace, that also might be a hint that you need someone who has some professional training rather than your friend or your partner. If the nightmares don't stop in your daily life, what do I mean by that? If you've got a dream hangover all day long and it keeps coming back to you and it's interfering with your work or interfering with your personal life, if the nightmare is starting to interfere with your waking life as well, you want to think, this might be more than I and my friend can handle. This might be time to seek someone who's got some professional training who can help me work this through. And then the other part of your question is what types of therapeutic modalities are particularly helpful. There's a pretty broad range of what we call best practice trauma treatment these days. So for starters, if you're looking to work with your dreams and nightmares with someone, to see if they have experience sort of in general in working with people who've had histories of trauma. But in terms of modality, both Debbie is a faculty member of the EMDR Institute, and I'm not a faculty member, but I'm trained in the EMDR, and I've been doing it for many years. And for my money, that's sort of the biggest bang for your buck in terms of best practice trauma treatment. It's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and that's a different conversation about what it is. But basically, on one foot, it allows us to access both sides of our brain, our left brain and our right brain, by crossing midlines. Some of you might be familiar with sort of the eye movement. And then allows us to actually access parts of our unconscious self that our rational conscious mind has trouble accessing. So that's a tiny, very, very minimal explanation of the EMDR. There's more to it than that. There's a cognitive behavioral protocol that goes with it, and this should not be practiced at home. This is someone who you want a trained professional who knows how to do it. To make sure I say that. In addition to that, there's a whole range of somatic interventions, of body-mind interventions that attend to how the body is responding to the trauma as well. Peter Levine's work in somatic experiencing, Pat Ogden's work in psychomotor psychotherapy. There's a range of cognitive behavioral treatment from CBT, which is cognitive behavioral, to DBT, which is dialectical behavioral, which includes a mindfulness practice. And then there's a range of spiritual approaches as well. And I always want to tell people, don't forget your soul when you're working in healing from trauma. Because one of the phrases that are often used with people who've experienced traumatic events is that it can be a soul-shattering experience. And in shamanic practice, it's talked about how the soul actually can leave the body during traumatic events. And then part of our work is to bring our soul back home and reunite those fragmented parts of ourself. So whatever, it may or may not be a traditional religious practice, it might be something far afield, but tune in to how you heal and comfort your soul as part of your dream work as well, because that is going to put the dot on the I and cross the T to getting to a place of, we say in Hebrew, refuah shlema, a completer healing.
So kind of on the heels of those comments, is there a role for spirituality in the healing of trauma, in the healing of nightmares?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's a question that we could spend another hour or two talking about. So when we're finding our safe places, our safe people, whether it's inside or outside of the dream, to attend to what brings us to a sense of awe. For some people, it's going out into nature. That is the quintessential spiritual experience, is to walk in the meadow or to walk in the woods or to be by the ocean. For someone else, having a really good heart-to-heart with Jesus is just the right thing to do. And for someone else, invoking the Shekhinah, the feminine presence of God, is just the right thing to do. Or to wrap yourself in the wings of an angel is just the right thing to do. There's no right or wrong.
Right.
It's what you resonate with.
And there's a lot of attention these days on what we call post-traumatic growth, post-traumatic spiritual growth, and I'm wondering whether you think that there's a place for that in this process of resolving nightmares.
So the last chapter in the book is called From PTSD to PTSD, Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder to Post-Trauma Spiritual Growth. So the final chapter is really about this process of healing and finding a place to move from our resonance with upset and pain and grieving to do the healing for ourselves and then be able to move on to take that healing out into the world as well. And a lot of people are working in that vein now, Eastern philosophies, Western philosophies, indigenous philosophies. And I want to make sure we have some time for questions and answers as well. So I told Debbie that I wanted to just read a dream. So in the book, I have lots and lots of examples and dreams and conversations with people, some of my own dreams and some other people's dreams, and I thank everyone, whether they're here in the room now or not, who so graciously contributed their dreams and shared them with me as I wrote this book. But to end this part and then open it up to you all, I had a dream toward the end of writing the book that I put in the last chapter. And in this, the subtitle of the subheading in the chapter is Reaching for the Light and Finding Faith. So I'm going to get choked up. I forgot that I was going to get choked up. I tend to do that. So so I wipe a tear. It's all right.
Absolutely.
So on the winter solstice, the year I was writing the book, I had the following dream. I am in a small, dark room, like a cell. It is cold and dank in there, and I'm crouched down against the wall, hugging my knees. Suddenly, a beam of light comes through the bars of the window. I stand up, turn, and I hold my arms out to the light, and I'm transported on the light beam up and out through the bars of the window into the world outside. So that's the dream I want to leave you with for now, and to think about the movement right there in a few sentences from trapped alone in a dark cell to being held and transported out into the light in the dream. And not by coincidence, I think, it happened on the winter solstice. So,
Bravo.
Debbie, thank you so much for your great questions. And
My pleasure.
Go ahead.
So we want to turn to all of you now, and Linda's going to take some questions, and I'll just help moderate or point questions
Or comments.
or comments
Right, doesn't have to be a
or
question, could be a comment,
confusions.
a thought, a clarification. Yes, hi.
Hi, just your thoughts or experience on lucid dreaming in sort of the line of dissociation within a dream, because I'm thinking if the dream is very frightening and I realize that I'm dreaming, I can
Right.
dissociate from it a bit. And how that might, or other things that might heal from lucidity.
Great question.
And you might want to explain what lucid dreaming is.
I absolutely will do that, thank you. So lucid dreaming means that you are aware that you're dreaming while you're dreaming. So it's like being awake inside your dream. This is a skill that can be learned. Some people spontaneously become lucid. I don't know. Anybody spontaneously become? Yeah, a whole bunch of you. So all of a sudden you're in the middle of a dream and it's like, I'm having a dream. And that can be cool, fun, or immensely comforting. If you're having a scary dream and you think, oh, this is a dream. Oh, phew, right? So actually I have an example in the beginning of the book of a dream that I was having, and I'm very lucky. I tend not to have nightmares too often, but at one point, there's a whole longer story, but at one point in the nightmare, in the dream, I'm trying to swim up from underwater, and I can see up there is the surface of the water, and I'm not sure if I'm going to make it or not. And then I said, oh, I'm having a dream. I can do anything I want. And then I managed to break through to the top because I realized I have infinite energy. I can hold my breath for as long as I want because it's a dream. So it's very, very comforting for me to be able to realize that. So that's an advantage of either spontaneously or learning and training yourself to have lucid dreams. And that's a longer conversation, and there are lots and lots of great books written about lucid dreaming, so I would refer you to some of them if you're interested. Here's the caveat that I put with lucid dreaming and trauma. Lucid dreaming can be really, really fun too, and people go lucid in their dreams and they fly and they have great sex and they go on adventures, and you can do anything you want if you're lucidly dreaming and you have some control over what's happening in your dream life. However, if we're having repetitive nightmares, it's really great to be able to say, oh, this is a dream. But if we only take ourselves away and we only fly out of it every time, I think we might not learn what it is that the nightmare has been coming to teach us. So by all means, practice and use your lucidity to be conscious that this is a dream and stay as safe as possible, but don't use it if you think or know there's a traumatic event that has to be worked through, because you don't want to just avoid it, because that's why the repetitive nightmare might be there in the first place. So, great. Thank you for asking. Yes?
I have one. So can you talk a little bit about how you can use your dreams to tap into your creativity, and also how you can use it to solve real life problems?
Great. So, let me think how to respond.
Two little questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you got an hour. No, it's fine. Good. Let me answer both of them by talking about dream incubation, because they can cover both with that. So dream incubation is you can program yourself to answer questions in your dreams. So if you have a creative dilemma or a creative block or a question that you want answered that you would really like to get some information about, before you go to sleep at night, spend a few minutes or a half an hour, however long you want, and do some journaling about the issue, the dilemma, the creative block, the information you want, and write it down in your journal. try to end your writing with as clear a question as possible that's an actual question about what you're seeking information. And then when you have a dream, write it down on the same page as the journaling you did, incubating the dream. Somewhere in that dream is going to be answers to your question. Now you might need to work with the dream and peel back the layers to figure it out. But there'll be some response that's at least hinted at in your dream. I'm actually going to put my poncho on because it's really cold in here. If you don't get a dream the first night, or if you can't figure out what's going on, not to despair, just do it again. Because like anything else, practice makes perfect. And you know, for weightlifting, we don't start lifting 150 pounds like we start with 2 or 5 pounds, depending on the level of fitness you've got. So keep practicing remembering your dreams until you catch one. And you might try making your question more specific. The more specific your question, the chances are higher you'll get a dream to come to answer it. So if, for example, you're writing your novel and you're stuck on the plot line or what this character is like, don't just ask your dreaming self for, can you help me with my novel, or what should I do next? Say really specifically, can you give me some information about what the character of Mary Ellen is actually about? And what would Mary Ellen sound like if I give her dialogue in my book? So really specific. So that'll help sort of prime the pump of creativity. Yes, hi.
Hi, I have a question. So earlier you gave an example of somebody that was ready to get attacked by the monster, and there was a brick wall, and there was an alternative, they could jump to the top of the wall and escape. Do you think the reason that we wake up is because we're not ready to deal with that monster or whatever it is, or is there another reason?
Well, the short answer is could be. Right? So one absolutely reason is when we're not ready, we're just not ready. And we might need other resources in our life before we're ready to deal with it. So absolutely yes. Yeah, that could be one reason. Yeah, that's it. Yes, hi.
Hi. This isn't exactly about trauma, but my dreams are very vivid. When I wake up, I can tell you everything that's happened, and it leaves an emotional residue often.
Mm-hmm.
How come my husband never remembers his dreams? What's the difference?
Great saying.
So, what you did beautifully without realizing it is you didn't say, my husband doesn't dream, right? Because we know, actually, that we all dream approximately 5 to 7 times every night because we have REM cycles, but we don't all remember our dreams. So partially it has to do with, when are we waking up? Are we waking up at the point in our sleep cycle where we're having REM sleep or not? So many things can interfere with our sleep, and if we're waking up at odd times of the night, it might be harder to remember our dreams. If we're taking certain medications, that might suppress some of the biochemicals that would help us to remember our dreams. So that would be a reason as well. Different life stages, and then different sort of personality styles as well. There are some people who, and there's no better or worse, right? There's no.
What's more interesting to remember your dreams?
Well, I'm in your camp, but some people, those people aren't here, right? The ones you all are like, dreams are so cool, I'm coming to learn more about it. And people who don't think dreams are so cool aren't here. So if someone doesn't value a dream, isn't interested in a dream, is very scientifically minded and pretty sure that dreams are just sort of like hooey and, hardwiring of the brains and the neural networks, and it's like, doesn't mean anything, they'll probably remember their dreams less because they don't care about them that much.
He probably had a crazy sleep cycle for a long time too because of being what he did for a living.
That too, if you do night shift or odd hours and your sleep cycle is disrupted.
Pediatric.
A surgeon, a pediatrician, yeah, absolutely. If your sleep cycle is disrupted, that will disrupt your dreaming as well.
Thank you. Well, that's very helpful.
Oh, good. Yes.
If you have something that's kind of like a strong premonition, like I remember when I was a kid and the phone rang this one time, I knew I just burst into tears because I knew who it was, and I knew what I didn't know what they were going to say, but I knew that I was losing them. And I was like 11 or 12. And so does something like that come from the same place that lucid dreaming comes from? It's like the way that your innermost part connects to vast knowing or something, like, is it a similar thing?
So where exactly this ability comes from, I can't say for sure. We can all have ideas and thoughts about where this comes from, but we know that from time immemorial, right, recorded in the history of pretty much every civilization that we know of, are people who were the prophets, and people who were the visionaries, and people who were the seers, who were somehow able to peek around the corner of time and space and know things in advance that they had no business knowing or no way to actually know. How or why exactly this happens, we can all hypothesize about, but absolutely it's a thing that most cultures and civilizations have, and some of the most revered members of the tribe, the shamans could do that, and they were elevated, they were revered as the wise elders in their tribe. So yes, that can happen. And sometimes we refer to that state as a waking dream, or it's a synchronicity where events that don't seem to go together somehow do, and there's meaning that we wouldn't have known otherwise. So yeah, and what parts of the brain exactly that comes from, or whether or not we're channeling divine knowledge at that moment, lots of different opinions about that. Oh, one and then two. Yeah.
When I was pregnant with my first,
Oh yeah.
I didn't have any tests, so I didn't know what the gender of the baby was. For almost the whole pregnancy, I thought it was a boy. And then I had a dream that it wasn't an image dream. It's the only time it was a feeling, like a presence, like a female body. That was the only way I explained it. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I said, "Oh my God, the baby's a girl." We hadn't picked the girl's name. I said, "The baby's a girl." My husband thought I was crazy. I woke him up. Baby's a girl. We gotta pick a girl's name. She was a girl. But it was the only time I had a dream that wasn't images. It was a presence. You know what I mean?
So, what a lovely way of learning the gender of your baby. So lots of tough on that. But also, what we think of as a dream actually has a wide range of possibilities. Like, we think of a dream as a story with a narrative and a beginning and middle and an end. A dream absolutely can be just a presence, can be a felt sense. A dream can be an emotion. You wake up in the morning, you're inexplicably happy, you don't know why, that's your dream. You wake up in the morning, you're terrified, you're anxious, you don't know why, that's your dream. So sometimes you have a feeling in your body that nothing in your physical life can really quite account for. When you wake up, that's your dream. So you had that kind of a dream, a non-narrative dream.
I think it's the only time. It was the only time I remember because it was so significant.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for sharing that.
So here's do we have to be sleeping to have our dream?
I love that question. So we can dream when we're awake. We can dream when we're asleep. And we can dream in those liminal in-between states called the hypnopompic and the hypnagogic zones that are right at the edges where we're not quite asleep but almost, and we're not quite awake but almost. Those are dream states too. If you are walking around and paying attention in your waking life to synchronicities, or if you've incubated something that you're wondering about, and then you notice something as you're taking your walk that reminds you of the question that you asked That's a dream. That's a waking dream.
Because there's been times where I just, when I close my eyes, I know I'm falling into a sleep. And behind my eyelids, I see, it's been nightmarish, I always see a face. And this face is not well. And, but I wake up with it because it doesn't feel good, so then I fall asleep and that face is gone. I'm just wondering that why is, no, it's kind of a crazy question. Maybe
No crazy question.
I small you. It's really a screen. It's right behind the eyelid.
Did you say scream?
Screen.
Screen.
Like a screen.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the weirdest thing in the world. I'm a very I dream like most everyone, and I do write them down. And they linger. A lot of them are really beautiful, and I love the metaphor, that idea, and it's everything is not really concrete. It's a metaphor. They're all, and I understand all that, and I see my son. I learn a lot from my dream and all that, but I just am so puzzled by that thing that just appeared all of a sudden. It's funny.
So,
Yeah.
I want to respond to that, Mia, but before I do, how many people have had a similar experience? Right? If you look around, there's about a half a dozen, 8, 10 people who say, yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah, so I thought that might be comforting for starters.
Yeah.
And there's a number of different ways to think about how to answer that. And one of them has to do with your question about lucid dreaming, and there's an aspect of lucid dreaming called the lucid void, that when we are entering our sleeping state, we sort of go into what's called the lucid void, which is in the sort of, it's the, like the metaverse, in a way, where we're sort of in an in-between place of time and space. We don't know what's actually there. We kind of go through a black hole in time and space, and we enter another realm. And that's talked about in lucid dreaming very often. So that's one aspect of what might be going on there. The other thing is, sometimes when we close our eyes, and this is, I haven't done any research on this is my personal opinion. When we close our eyes, we sort of see the pictures almost like they were painted on our eyelids on the underneath. And you're nodding, so that's a little bit like what you're talking about. But this thing about the face, right? I have heard this before. I have heard other people talk about it before. And what I can say from personal experience is I sometimes close my eyes and I see an eye. Not a whole face, just an eye. And when I was younger, and I would see this eye when I closed my eyes, it would kind of freak me out. It would be a little like, oh my God, this eye is staring at me. It would be a little bit like unnerving. But gradually over the years, I developed a relationship with this eye, where it's sort of like the eye of God now. And so when I close my eyes now and I see that eye, rather than feeling frightened, just exactly what you did, I take a deep breath, and I feel comforted, and I feel connected with something that's like a portal to the other side. And it might be, and I don't know, but it might be there's a similar thing you could do with the face and kind of transform it from something upsetting to see what is this face? Do I recognize this face? Have I ever seen a face like this in my life? Why is it here? And is there a way I can transform it from an upsetting face and befriend it, right? So when we tend and befriend our upsetting images, then we can transform it.
What's really funny though is that I don't want this to be my own class. What's really funny is that it sort of stopped, and now I'm back to dreaming, like good dream. But the other night I had a dream again. I closed my eyes and it was a train. Like I'm just trying to figure it out. Like with all your information tonight, which is so beautiful, and I can't wait to read this book. The first one is extraordinary, also.
Thank you.
It's just there's a lot of beauty that comes out of it.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you. Before I take the next question, I'll just say, if these were my dreams, I have an association, I would be wondering about, and I know we have just a couple more minutes before we have to wrap up, but I might be wondering about what is something that I need to face in my life with the face dream. Is there something I am or I'm not facing if there's a face there? And with the train dream, I'd wonder about, well, what's a train to me? Is it my train of thought, or is it a choo-choo train? And what's my relationship with trains anyway? Are they fun? Do I like them? Did I ever put a penny on the tracks and play with it getting run over as a kid? So think about the metaphors.
I just thought.
Well, okay.
I'm gonna go now.
No extra charge. That's so cute.
Worth
Thank
the
you.
price of admission.
Yeah.
So, Linda, this is so wonderful.
Thank you, sweetheart.
So wonderful. And I wonder if you dreamed your next book.
Oh,
Good question.
as a matter of fact, at one point I really wasn't sure if I had another book in me or not, or just articles, but I've come to realize that I actually do, and I think it's not going to be out as quickly as this one, because I'm a little bit tired, but I've been taking notes on it. So starting next month, actually, I'm teaching a class at Hebrew College called Finding the Gifts and Healing Our Ancestral Wounds Through Dreaming. And that, more or less, and I'm not sure if that's the title or not, but that's the theme of the next book, is doing epigenetic looks of our ancestral lineage and what we are carrying, both from our own lives and from previous generations, and how to work with that through dreaming. So, in process.
You're on a roll, girl.
Yeah.
Karen.
This really isn't a question, but more of a statement. When relatives come into our dreams, and sometimes it's just sort of about them and they're there, and you're happy to see them, but you're not really interacting with them. It's just kind of a presence. And then once in my life, my mother was in the back seat and she was really there. And I looked and went, oh my God, my mom's here. And she was young and beautiful. And she was kind of like, I'm doing fine. You just turn around.
Aww.
And she was with these guys and just living the life, you know. And she was so real. As opposed to dreaming about my brother recently, and he was there and it was nice. We were interacting, and I was telling him, you're good, you're doing great. I'm with you. I'm behind you. It was less interactive in a way, so I don't know if there's a distinction about the afterlife and, you know.
Well, you described it really well, and just before I answer your question, I think we're probably getting close to being out of time, so there might have been one more question. If there is, we'll take it, but then we'll wrap up. So there are dreams that are about our relatives, or dreams that our relatives show up in that are a symbol or a metaphor for something. And then I believe there are dreams that are visitations. And what distinguishes a visit is this quality of vividness and presence and that felt sense of, she's really here. He's really here. This is not a dream. This is a visit. And your body will let you know if that's what you had. And it sounds like you got gifted by a visit. Isn't that true? Any final thoughts, comments, questions? Great.
I just on the same vein, just to share quickly a dream like that, a gift. After my dad died, my dad growing up was a lot, oh, social work, that's just an easy profession. I mean, you just always have this attitude about, oh, you play with kids, it's fine. And so, very formal German person. And the summer after he died, I had a dream, it was so real, that he was sitting on the floor in my therapy office with me where I usually sit with the kids. And we were talking, and when I woke up, that song, True Colors, was in my mind, so vivid, so strong. It's not a song I think about or play, and that felt like the gift to me, like one from the other side, that he could really, truly see who I am and what I do.
Oh, what a great dream, and what a great way to wrap up our time together tonight, to see you in your true colors and to see us all in our true colors. Thank you all so much.